Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video what we're going to be doing is talking about data structures or data collections. Basically, in every language there's a handful of ways to batch more than one piece of data together. Usually it's an array. In Python they're called lists. So we kind of mentioned lists last time where they kind of look like this. So like I have a list of names and I put them in square brackets and I separate each individual value with a comma. Now let's explore this a little bit more. I'll get rid of the loop. Now let's say I wanted to print a Bob. Okay, so I just want to grab Bob from names. I would do this. Print names is the list that I want to grab it from. And then I have to put in square brackets and I put an index. So lists, all the values get an index starting with 0. So Bob would be 0. So in this case, I'm grabbing the 0 index of the names thing. So now if I run the code, and see, I get Bob. Okay. Now, I don't have to put an exact number in there. I could put a variable. So I can put a variable. Let's say we create a variable called index. And I can say if I want to grab, so index will equal, let's say we want to grab James. So Bob is 0, Susie is 1, James is 2. So we'll say index equals 2. So that way, in this case, when it says names index, that's really 2. Okay. So, boop. And see, I ended up printing out James. Very nice. Okay, so index 2, yada, yada, yada. You guys get the point. And there's all sorts of functions. Let's say I wanted to add something to, what you would do is you would do append. I think it's append to names. So give me the unsolved reference append. Yeah. Okay, so that's right. These are on the, so it's names dot append, and then names dot append means I can add a value at the end. So it's kind of like a push in JavaScript. So I'm going to add Alex. So now if I print out the whole list, like so, Alex should be in the list now. So let's see here. And see, Alex is in the list. Now let's see here. What if I wanted to get rid of James before I add Alex? I could do names.pop. Pop gets rid of the last thing on the list. So that would get rid of James, and then we would add Alex. So then you should have Bob, Susie, Alex. Bob, Susie, Alex. Okay, so there's all these different functions. There's more of them. Another important one is length. I think length is a standalone function if I remember right. So I have to do len names. And let's actually wrap this in a print so we can see what it is. Print. So it's like, what is the length of names? So in that case, it would be 3 because it's 1, 2, 3. And then after we pop out James and we add Alex, it's still 3. So it'll be a length of 3 that will print to the screen. And there you go. Cool. Okay, and the reason why that's useful is because you're going to use that a lot to loop over arrays. Now, let's say I want to loop over this list. I could use the for loop as we did before. So for name in names, okay, print name. And this would work. Okay, Bob, Susie, James. But what if I wanted to use a while loop? Okay, so again, just to kind of break it down the way we did before, we'll say loops. How many loops do I want? I want to loop as many times as there are items in the array. So that's why I would use len. Length of names, which should be 3. And we're going to start with 0. Okay, because it's... So our counter should always start with 0. And the reason you want to set it up this way is because technically the indexes are 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so we really don't want to hit index 3 because there is no index 3. There's no 4th item. So then what you do is you do while, okay, while counter is less than loops, we will print names at the counter index, and then we will add one to the counter. Okay, which another way you can add one to the counter is I can do this, plus equals 1. Okay, so what it does, it adds 1 to the current value of counter and takes that value and makes it counter. So just to kind of reiterate that, this is the same as saying counter equals counter plus 1. And you can do that with minus, with divide, with whatnot. It's the same deal, just a little bit less typing. Okay, so if I do that, I should kind of get the same result, Bob, Susie, James. Yep, see, Bob, Susie, James, because it loops the first time. At the 0 index is Bob. And the next time counter is 1, because we added 1 to counter here. So the second time we end up printing Susie, and then we end up printing James. So that's pretty straightforward. Okay. How to loop over a list. Okay. But a list isn't, and the cool thing about a list is that you can change the values, you can add values, you can subtract values, but there are other ways to store data. There is a, first let's talk about a tuple. A tuple also, you can put whatever data you want. Works like a list, for the exception is that once you make it, you can't change it. Okay, so if I were to do names equals, a tuple will be in parentheses, so it becomes Bob, Susie, James. I can't add to this tuple. Okay, so this is a tuple. And but I am allowed to have duplicates, so I could have 2 James in there. Okay, so I can be like, and I can print the tuple. I can loop over the tuple. So for name and names. So I can do that. I just can't change the values, so I can't do this. So first let's show you that that works before I show you what doesn't work. Okay, so you see here, we have the tuple with the duplicates. See where we print out the values in the tuple. That all works fine, but that's what happens when I try to change one of them. So let's try to change the duplicate of James. So we'll say names at the 3rd index, which would be 2, equals hello. Okay. And then we'll print the list again. Okay, we get an error. See, a tuple object does not support item assignment. You can't change it. If it was a list, so if these were square brackets, then I could change it. Okay, so if I were to change this to square brackets again, back to a list. It would allow me to. So you see, first was Bobby, Susie, James, James, and then it was Bobby, Susie, hello, James. So this is referred to as mutability. Lists are mutable. You can change them. You can add things, you can subtract things, change the things that are already there. Tuples are immutable. Otherwise, they're the same thing as a list. There are reasons maybe you just don't want people to change the list by accident. So you make something mutable because you know you never want it to change, and you want it to throw an error if something changes. That way you can catch those errors. Okay? You generally, good practice in coding is if something doesn't need to change, make it not changeable. Because yes, it'll cause your program to crash when something tries to change it, but you want to know if that happens. You want it to crash so that way you know to go fix whatever's trying to change the data. Okay? So your programming throwing you an error, your program not working isn't a bad thing, because it helps you catch when things aren't working the way you want them to work. Making everything mutable, everything changeable, can make it where things change, but it doesn't throw an error because you're allowed to change it, but you don't know why things still aren't working out the way you expected them to, because there's no errors being thrown. So just some thought process on deciding sort of when do I want to be mutable versus when do I want data to be immutable. Cool. Now then there's also sets. Okay. So let me just delete all this. Okay. So names. Now we'll do names as a set. Now a set would start with curly brackets, and then I can put in Bob, Susie, James. Okay, and so far it looks just like a list. So if I print names and then I print names and the third spot, which would be 2, should pretty much work the way we've been used to it working. Okay. Line 4. Oh, okay, yeah. So lists you could iterate over a list. You can't call individual items in a list. If not, you want it to be an array. So that line didn't work. But I could iterate it over. So I could be for name in names, print name. Again, that would still work. I can still, sets are iterable. Okay. But they're not subscriptable, which just means I can call the individual items via the index. I should have known that because it's the same way in JavaScript. Okay, print name, cool. But that's a set. The big thing about a set is that it can't have duplicates. So let me try to put a duplicate in the set. So I say, hey, this is my set. See, it all works, but see, the duplicate's been eliminated. That extra James is not there anymore, because when it creates a set, it removes any duplicates. So if you have an array and you wanted to clean out all the duplicates, one way you could do it is you could take that array, turn it into a set, that would clean out all the duplicates, and then turn that set back into an array. And then you would have an array with no duplicates. Okay, and the last data type is called a dictionary. A dictionary is what's oftentimes referred to as a map in some languages, or a object in JavaScript. But in this case, it's called a dictionary. So in this case, we'll say we're going to create Bob. Okay, Bob is our variable, and Bob is a dictionary, which starts out with curly brackets. The big difference between this and a set is that there's key and value pairs. So first I put a key, so we'll say Bob's name, colon, his name is Bob. Then we put a comma. Then we put his age, which is, we'll say 55. Okay, then we'll have his state, which we'll say is Nevada. Okay, and I can be like, I can print Bob now, so print Bob, and it'll give me all of Bob's data. But if I want to print out one individual piece of data, then I can just do this, Bob, curly brackets, but instead of a number index, I put in the key. So I want to print Bob's name, and that'll print just the name. Okay, and there you go. So you see, name Bob, age 55, state Nevada, Bob. So that's pretty useful. Okay, if you've ever played with objects in JavaScript, you can understand how useful this can be. Now, when this becomes really useful is when you start dealing with like arrays of dictionaries. So let's do this. People equals, it's an array, and in the array are dictionaries. So we have a first dictionary where the person's name is Alex and their age is 34. And then we have name. We have Bob, whose age 55. So basically I have 2 dictionaries in this array. Okay, if I want to print out one or the other, I can be like print people 0, that would print out me, Alex, And if I did print people 1, that would print out Bob. See? And I could also loop over it. So I could do for person in people. For person in people, print person dot, oh no, person name, print person age. Okay. So see, first it prints out Alex 34, then Bob 55. Okay, so basically when you start mixing and matching these data structures, you can see how you can structure data in ways that's really useful for you to get a lot out of a little bit of code. So if this is a list of 100 people, so if you gave me an array with 100 of these people dictionaries, I could easily just list all these people just with this little line of code right here. Okay, that's pretty cool. Okay, I think this gives you an idea. Again, what are the 4 different ones? Okay, we have lists, which again, those use curly square brackets. Then we have tuples, which those use parentheses, but again, those are immutable. Okay, then we have sets, which use curly brackets, but there's no duplicates. Okay, and again, not subscriptable. You can't call an individual item based on its index. Okay, and then you have dictionaries, which also use curly brackets but have key value pairs. So key is name, value is Bob. Okay. So that's generally all the main data structures in Python and the basics of how to use them. There's a lot of them. This is probably where you'll spend a lot of time in your code, oftentimes playing with the data, making the data what you want it to do the things that you need to do. Okay, so you might get a data in a text file and you need to turn that into a bunch of dictionaries and arrays and whatnot, so that way you can easily like search through it and do stuff. So my name's Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.